Yo, what's up guys, your boy Johnny OS. In today's video, we're going to be going over the season 14. I guess you could say this is going to be after patch 14.21 Cassante item tier list. So we're only going to be going over tank items because I don't think bruiser items are that good on him anymore. And also this tier list only really showcases tank items. There would only be one exception of an item that I would actually put on this list, and that would be a D-Dance. And I think D-Dance would be pretty good against a bunch of melee champions, and I would probably put it in like a maybe B-tier. But besides that, this is the list so far. All right, guys, before we get into the video, I'd appreciate it if you guys took the time to leave a like and comment down below. Let me know if you guys actually want more of these types of videos, get guides, tier lists, things of this nature. I definitely have a lot of Cassante guides and other types of just like non-gameplay related content that's going to be coming out, while I'm also kind of preparing my Road to Master series and some other videos that I have planned as well. So as you guys know, my goal is to hit at least 500 subscribers by the end of the year. And as the recording of this video, it is November 1st, and we only have about a month or two left to hit that mark. If everything keeps going the way it has been ever since I started recording, we should be able to hit that mark. Even if we don't, it's not the end of the world. I'm not going to stop making content for you guys, but it would be really cool if you were to be able to reach that milestone. All right, now with that being said, we're going to be getting into the actual tier list. So everything that's on this tier list is kind of in order, in the same specific order, and the reasoning behind it kind of has to do with overall, if you're always going to be building this item, in terms of item efficiency, build efficiency, and also how often, like I think I said this already, but how often you're gonna be building this item in most of your games. So obviously at the end here, this one is just doesn't exist. Because I remove this from the list. I just don't want to leave it in the bottom, so just left it and doesn't exist. Okay, you want to be a dick about it? Okay, there you go. So obviously it doesn't exist. And I think we're just going to go straight from the top. So obviously, I think this one is pretty safe to say, guys. Jak'Sho is going to be the best item that you can build on this champion. Overall, Cassante, the champion that skills off of resists, this item essentially gives you the potential to just boost your resist by, I think, 30% after it's max stack, quiet phone. And just overall, you're probably going to be building this item 9 times out of 10, if not 10, 11 times out of 10, every game as like your third, maybe sometimes even second item. Now, depending on the game, it might not be the best second item. I can see it being a pretty decent second item if the enemy team has like a lot of mixed damage and you really need just like a little boost to kind of, let's say there's like a little bit of a Fed Aurelion on the enemy team or something like that, and you don't want to commit fully into going just like a full-on magic resist item because you still need to kind of split push versus a Renekton or like a Riven or something like that. Getting this as a second item can still help you kind of bridge the gap in between going into a team fight against like a Fed Annie and not getting a one shot because you have like 2 armor items, right? So I think it's fair to say Jak'Sho is just number 1 on this list. I don't think anyone would ever debate with me on that as a whole. Going on to our second item, I'm going to be saying Thornmail is actually the second best item. Now, a lot of people might disagree with it. They might not think that's the case because Thornmail is generally built against champions who are going to auto attack you and also champions who have healing. So if you need healing reduction, but the healing reduction only applies on champions that also are going to hit you. So it's only really good against like 80 carries and like potentially like bruisers who are going to be auto attacking you, and maybe some tanks that are going to be auto attacking you. And the reason for why I actually put this item on the second list is because a lot of times you actually do end up building this item. Especially now, I think in this iteration of League of Legends, most characters kind of have some form of sustain in their kits, and at least the champions that are being played, for the most part, if they are AD, a lot of them do have sustain, especially up in the top lane. In the top lane, you're going to be dealing with a lot of champions who are going to have some form of sustain in their kit, and even if it's just by reducing the healing just by a little bit, it could honestly be the difference between you getting a kill, you getting killed, or you getting like a double kill and stuff like that, right? So if you're going to be going up against like these Warwick tops, even Darius's, it's pretty good. If there's a Viego on the enemy team who's kind of fed, like all these champions end up healing, but also not only that, it could be because enchanters are being played on the other side. If there's like a Soraka or if there's like a Sona, these champions who are going to be healing the actual enemy team, but they're still going to be hitting you, the healing that they're going to receive is going to get reduced from the enchanters if you have this item. So a lot of times you actually do end up building this item, even though it's not really to counter the champion specifically, but just because the comp, dude, shut up. This is why I normally have my phone and toss it away. This is why I normally build this item as a whole. And sometimes you can just sit on the bramble vest and you don't have to actually complete the item. But why I think this item is really, really, really strong is because of its build path. Now, depending on the game, and I'm going to go over this specifically, because K'Sante right now is, he spikes harder on components than he does on completed items. So just remember that, guys. K'Sante spikes harder on his components than he does on completed items, with the exception of Jak'Sho, because it gives you like a 30% boost, and Force of Nature in specific cases, because if it's used in an actual specific case, you get, I think it's like 70 extra magic resist, which is huge. But for the most part, you're going to be spiking on your components more than you will on your completed items. And the reason for that is because K'Sante's damage obviously just scales flat off of armor and magic resist, and you are going to find it really easy to be building chain vests and negatrons because they're so cheap. They're so cheap and they're pretty cost effective for like what you're paying, like 80 for like a chain vest, and you get 40 armor for 800 gold. Now, getting 800 gold in lane is relatively easy. Even if you do fall a little bit behind in lane, you'll find it easier for you to build yourself a chain vest and maybe like a boots and like another like another, what do you call it, cloth armor, than you would to actually try to get your completed item. And just by getting like one or two of like either like it's gonna be like a chain vest, two chain vests, or like like a Negatron cloak, that makes your damage, but also the cast time and the cooldown on your Q go down significantly. Sorry. So that's why K'Sante spikes harder on components, is mainly because you are going to get your cast time and your cooldown on your Q shortened, with essentially each component with it being a armor / magic resist item, either being a Negatron or a chain vest, and the cooldown is going to go down as well. Not also on top of that, the actual scaling of your damage scales off of those two. So you're going to find a lot of success with just going back to base and actually just building like a chain vest or like even two chain vests, and then going into like maybe like a Negatron, you know what I'm saying? But what I think is genius is the fact that Thornmail now does not only just build out of a bramble vest and like a giant's belt, it actually builds out of a chain vest and a bramble vest. So what you can essentially do is go back to base, build two chain vests if you don't feel like you actually need the healing reduction right away, and then you could actually complete either Unending Despair. If you want, you could go to like a Sunfire Cape. You can go, I mean, don't build Deadman's really, but like if you like as your first item, I wouldn't do it. But there's so many different items that you can actually build first. You can go for your Iceborne Gauntlet first. There's so many different items that you can actually build first, and then pivot with the second chain vest to go into your Thornmail. Or even if you don't want to get your Thornmail right away because you see throughout the game that now the Aurelian Soul is getting fed, you can actually go for your Jak'Sho if you feel like you need to group with your team. And that's why I think it's such a good item, because it actually fits really well in the middle of your build, just because if you have that flexibility with the chain vest. And that's why I'm putting it at the S tier, because I just think just by having chain vests like in your inventory, it always just gives you like the opportunity for you to build this item if you feel like you need it. Going on to the third item that I think is in the S tier is Force of Nature. Now, obviously, this could be debatable between Spirit Visage and Force of Nature. I think Force of Nature right now, currently, with the way a lot of the stronger AP champions are, and like how I truthfully think that right now some of the strongest AP champions are the ones who build Leandries and Blackfire Torch. I think Force of Nature in that, at least in that real like case, is going to be better than Spirit Visage. Also due to the fact that Spirit Visage, a lot of your, a lot of the extra, I guess you could say like benefit from it is like the healing you're going to get. The shielding is really good, don't get me wrong. The shielding is really good, but the thing is that there's almost no way other than Magic Pen to like really get rid of magic resist. And you could potentially just get a Serpent's Fang, or you could just get Heal Cut, which kind of just, destroys this build a little bit. Now, there are going to be specific cases in which people aren't going to be building Serpent's Fang. If you're going up against like a full AP team, most of the time, no one's ever going to be building Serpent's Fang. Sometimes Serpent's Fang just kind of sucks on specific champions, so they just won't build it. And, you could get a lot of value off of Spirit Visage, but I just think overall, 9 times out of 10, you would probably be getting more value from Force of Nature due to the movement speed that it gives you and the overall magic resist that you're going to be getting as a whole when it's fully stacked. Now, obviously, if you're playing against champions that won't fully stack it, you do lose a lot of value, and then you could kind of like move these in between each other, or you can just put Kainic Rooker in here because it will overall be like the more stable item. But I actually find myself building either Force of Nature or Spirit Visage more than I actually build Kainic Rooker. Mainly because if you're going up against Mordekaisers, champions that build Rylai's, champions that build Liandry's, I think Force of Nature is going to be a better overall item, especially if it has to be like your first item or your second item that you're going to be getting against these types of champions, just because the extra magic resist you get is really, really, really strong. Recently I played against an Udyr, and I actually just rest Force of Nature against him, and he couldn't do anything against me. Like, it's just GG at that point. Not only does his R's just like not hurt you as much as before, I think he also got nerfed, but just in general, like, you getting kited against some of these champions is going to be a lot easier. Hui is a really, really, really strong champion right now, and his QE is a broken spell. Having this against him just helps a lot. Brand is also a really, really, really strong champion right now, I find, and just against the Rylai's and like the, the Dots, the Malzahars, those types of champions who like, like to go for Rylai's on like a burn item, Force of Nature is going to be really strong. Now, obviously, if you're playing against like burst mages, like the LBs, even like Diana's, I find like obviously Force of Nature might not be as good, or like poke champions like Xerath, like these artilleries, like the Ziggs who goes for like a full poke build and not like the burn build. Burn build, I think Force of Nature will be better, but like if he's just gonna go like just bomb damage, obviously I think Rooker or Spirit Visage could be pretty decent just for your shields, right? Like this obviously amplifies your shields, so if you were to shield some of his damage, you'll get a bigger shield, you'll take less damage, etc, etc, etc. But anyways, just in that type of logic, I would put Force of Nature in the S tier, just because I think currently overall as an item, I would like to build this more, just because I think, also guys, don't forget, this is very important. The build path for Force of Nature over Spirit Visage is better, because you can go back to base and get a Negatron Cloak faster than you can get a Spectre's Cowl. And that's huge. Going back to base and just getting, I think it's 40 magic resist off your Negatron Cloak is going to be better than getting like I think it's like 35 or something like that on a Spectre's Cowl, since there's like the HP component that goes into it. And I think that's going to be doing way more for you in lane in terms of damage and like your Q and everything is going to be way better of being able to go for that. But also, let's say you do play against like, I don't know, like a Gwen top or like a Mordekaiser, or like you're playing, like it just gives you like overall just gives you build flexibility. You can either go into like a Kainic Rooker, or you can even just turn it into a Jak'Sho if you find out like, okay, I'm playing against Mordekaiser, but he got shit on, but like the enemy talent is fed and I don't want to commit to this item, and I don't really want to even try to 1v1 Mordekaiser. I don't need to. I need to deal with the talent, like the Zed, or like a Kiana, whatever it is, really like any AD champion. Just going for this item could be a better option than just opting for the full Force of Nature. And that, I think, especially as a tank, build flexibility is important, because even though K'Sante does deal damage when he transforms, the base part of his kit is about not taking damage, right? And even if you can deal damage, if you just die because your build is quote unquote not optimal, overall you're just not gonna be able to play the game. It's not like you're just playing like Katarina, where it's like, I just need to deal damage and that's it. Like I need to deal damage and I buy Zonias, or I need to deal damage and I buy like a Banshees. No. Like as a tank, you really need to optimize your build as much as possible, and just by having build flexibility, it helps you kind of pivot mid-game. And I think this item is just easier for you to pivot into like a Jak'Sho or like a Kainic, rather than you committing to the Force of Nature fully. And I just think that this item is kind of better than the other ones as a whole. So because of that reason, I put it in the S tier, and I put Spirit Visage in the A tier just because of the Spectre's Cowl. All right, going on to Unending Despair. I'm going to try to go a little quicker with some of these, but for that one, I want to be a little bit more specific for the reasonings for why, because I think a lot of people would debate that maybe Spirit Visage or Rooker is better, and maybe Rooker is consistently just a little bit better just because of like, like the shield and like the poke and stuff, and like maybe the movement speed you don't need it, blah 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 blah. I just think overall late game you're gonna be playing against like the Hui's and shit, like the meta champs. This will be better than the Rookrun, but in specific cases, Rookrun is better. I will say that, and this isn't as optimal in certain cases. So it would either be this or this in the S tier, but like you could kind of swap them out, but I still find myself building this one more. Okay, going on to Unending Despair. I put Unending Despair out of all these items, the top of the A tier, mainly, especially if you're going to be playing against at least 2 melee champions. But if you're playing against more melee champions, this item just goes up the list, right? It's like if you're playing against no melee champions, this item is just kind of trash and you shouldn't build it. But as long as you even just have at least two melee champions, I'd say this item's an A tier. It's great. And if you have like anything more than 2, if you have like 3, this thing is an S tier item just off the gate. Like if you have like melee top, melee jungle, and like melee support, and you know you have 3 champions who are melee, this item is S tier. And after that, as long as you have 2, obviously I'd say it's just an A tier item. Reasoning for it is that it obviously builds off of a chain vest. I think you get a little bit of ability haste from it, but overall just being able to get that extra HP back in these like 1v1s, 1v2s is super huge. Even trading in the lane, it's really good. So as a first item, it's not that bad. It's actually a pretty decent first item. If you go double chain vest into Unending in like specific matchups, this will be a really good first item for you to build. And then like I said, because of the double chain vest, you could either go into a Thornmail, you could either go into like a Jak'Sho, or you can either go into like an Iceborne or like a Sunfire. Don't really build this, but like you could potentially, and that's why I think it's so strong as an item. I don't think there's anything much to say else about it. I think you guys kind of got the gist of it. I would say out of all these other items, this is just going to be better overall, and I think it deserves to be at the top of the A list. Going on to the second item into the A list, which is a contender to being an S tier item, but due to the build, I would say it is going to stay in the A tier, and that is Spirit Visage. And the main reason for why this isn't a S tier item is mainly just because of the Negatron cloak. If it was a Negatron cloak instead of a Spectre's Cowl, I think this item would just be S tier out the gate. Just because building that Negatron early is so imperative for K'Sante going on your first back, being able to either just get for 1600 gold, if you have like that much of a back, you can just go back to base and just get either like you can get 2 resist items, which will just put your Q at like about 80 if you get the right ones. That's 80, which is a bit more than half of what you need. Like it's like 20 more than half, right? 60, 120, 60. I think it's 120 for like the full thing. Yeah, because it's 444, 3 times 4, 120. So you'd be like a bit more than half on your whole cooldown of your Q and like the cast time. So that's just huge. But because you go for the Spectre's Cowl, you don't get that full benefit from like your Q cast. And also just the extra amount of gold. I think it's like what, an extra 400 gold to be able to actually get that first component. Just means that you need to stay in the lane that much longer, and sometimes being very rough matchups. AP matchups for K'Sante early are relatively pretty hard. It's really when you get your items that it becomes a lot easier, because those champions just can't really deal damage to you. They just, either their cooldowns are too long to really be able to hurt you, or like they just can't poke you out of lane anymore, so like you're able to actually get like some decent trades, or you could just farm because they can't bully you anymore. But for the most part, like I said, if this was like, it's not even because of like the regen factor, people building Serpent's Fang to counter like the shielding, people building cleave reduction to counter like the healing. It's not even because of that. It's really just because of Negatron Cloak. So if this item was a Negatron Cloak, it would be S tier, hands down, no matter what. But because of the fact that it's a Spectre's Cowl, I'm going to have to leave it in the A tier, but still above these two. Now, the third item that I'm going to be having in the A tier is going to be Frozen Heart. I think it's pretty fair to say Frozen Heart is really strong. I just think that overall, it's kind of like a more niche-ish item in the terms of like, you would think that having all that extra armor is great, and it is great, but just for like the benefit of you slowing attack speed in certain cases, isn't necessarily going to be the thing that you would want. Like, let's say you're playing against a Darius, right? I don't think having less attack speed, like, or at least lowering his attack speed, is going to help you when he just, you know, one-shots you with true damage. So this is where like the HP actually comes in handy from all these other items, which lacks from the Frozen Heart. And you're going to be playing against a lot of these champions where having just that little bit of extra HP is going to be more beneficial than just having that attack speed slow. And this item kind of starts coming in nicer as like a third or even fourth, fifth item. Like fourth, fifth item against specific compositions, I think Frozen Heart is really, really, really good. And it could be a very strong secondary item if you're up against like these specific matchups where you're up against like maybe some Trindamirs in the early game, even though Randuin's would be better in that sense. If Trindamir is the only one who has crit, like I'd say if you have like you're going up against like multiple crit champions, Randuin's would be better. But overall, Frozen Heart will just give you like a lot of value. But if you're just up against any champions that have like a lot of like attack speed, this could be like a really good, like I said, second or even third item, depending on the composition. The mana is great. Cassante obviously has like some mana issues now compared to before. So like having the extra mana is good. And it also gives you ability haste, which actually is pretty decent. You might think it's not as good, but having your W and your E on a shorter cooldown for Cassante is really great. Especially because now when you go all out, your cooldown on your E goes down by 50%. And you can still shorten that. So like maybe before you alt, it's on like a 4-second cooldown. I don't think it ever gets to that point, but then your E would be on a 2-second cooldown, right? Like if you're able to get it that short. So whatever it is, I'm going to go 50% from whatever it is, and just getting some ability haste from like certain items can still be pretty decent. Now, the last item that I'm going to be putting on the A tier, which I might even be putting it in the B tier, because I don't think it's as good as it used to be. I think this would actually probably be somewhere like this, and it might even go down to a C tier just because I feel like it's not as good, but we're going to keep it into B tier. We're actually going to put it into B tier. So we're going to go in our first item into B tier. Now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think Kinetic Rookrun is as good as it used to be, mainly just because I think it's kind of more of a niche item, and I think I would just rather go for Spirit Visage, because a lot of times you're going to go up against like a lot of melee champs and it pairs well together. I think Force of Nature just right now is just a better item than Kinetic Rookrun, but like it's really just like, I guess, in like specific cases where I think this item is really, really, really good. But like if not, like, and you know, from A to B isn't that crazy. I just think overall it's more niche and you're going to be using it in more specific use cases, mainly because of the fact of how Shield Bash works. Before it used to be really strong because of the way how Shield Bash used to work, but because of that being gone, now it just kind of lost value as an item. Anyways, we're going to go down to B. First item in the B tier is going to be Iceborne Gauntlet. Now, the reason for Iceborne Gauntlet isn't an S tier or an A tier item is mainly just because of the cost efficiency of like the components in it in a lot of situations. To put it simple, I'd rather get 2 chain vests than a chain vest and a sheen. Just because against a lot of these matchups, having that extra armor actually just helps you trade more efficiently in terms of like you receiving the damage rather than you dealing the damage. At this point, Cassante does so much damage just in his base form that you don't need the extra damage from Sheen to really be trading with people. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still very strong and you still can get a lot of good trades with it. But overall, for like I said, in terms of build flexibility and like opening up your build into different cases, I think you're better off going and recalling and getting 2 chain vests than you are getting a Sheen, because getting the Sheen locks you in. There's no flexibility in the rest of these items when you build a Sheen, but you have a lot of flexibility when you build that chain vest. So I can't really put it in like S or A tier, but I'll put it in B tier because I still think it's a very strong item. A little bit more niche now too. Like your Q still slows in your all out farm, so you don't need slows as much as before, but I would say you would get this against a lot of mobile champions who are really good at dodging your abilities, champions who either have like a lot of crazy mobility or like they're very slippery. I think this item does wonders for you. Champions like Fiora, any champion that you just find like you have trouble landing your abilities on, this item will be able to help you to like kind of land your abilities. Even against Rivens, I'd say this is also pretty good against Rivens, just because with all her dashes and her, it's going to be really hard for you to kind of like stick on her and like to land your abilities. A lot of times she could just stun you and run away, but if you have the Iceborne Gauntlet on her, it's hard for her to kind of run away from you and for her to kind of stick on you. So I'm going to put it at the top of the B just because I think it actually outclasses every other item here. As you guys can see, the B tier items aren't bad items, but they're just kind of more niche and like you just won't be building them as much as these items. These items, I'd probably build them like almost every other game. And these items are like ones that I would kind of swap out for some other items just because I feel like it's better in a specific game. Second item is going to be Kinetic Rookrun. Now, obviously, Kinetic Rookrun, like I said, lost a lot of value because it isn't as strong as it used to be. Essentially, before how Shield Bash used to work, it used to scale on your actual initial shield value. And essentially, when you had Kaenic Rooker in lane, you could essentially always just kind of proc your shield bash whenever it's up, just because you would always have that big Kaenic Rooker shield on you. And like the value you would get from it was just really huge against AP matchups. Now, I don't think this is a bad item. I just think overall, going into a game, if you know you're up against like a Cassiopeia or like even like a Rise and these other champions, maybe not Rise, but like I truthfully think like as long as you're not Rise in lane, I'd say Spirit Visage or Force of Nature is going to be doing you more, especially if they have a lot of slows. Force of Nature is just a better item. But if you're going to be playing like Cassante mid against like bursty champions or pokey champions, I think Kaenic Rooker could save you a lot of mana. Spirit Visage is not bad, but then you would have to use your E shield to kind of block damage. And like the region isn't terrible. So like the Spectre does feel good, but I think this also builds out a Spectre if I'm not wrong. I don't know if they changed the build, but at least it used to be like Negatron plus Spectres. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what the build used to be. So you would still get like that regen value from it. Feel free to correct me in the comment section down below. But overall, against like these bursty matchups in the mid lane or in the top lane, if you're playing against like a kind of like a pokey, ranged champions, for some reason you're playing against some like pokey Hui top or some shit, I think this would do pretty decent. Actually, not even Hui, sorry. But I feel like Force of Nature would be better versus Hui. Like Xerath top, let's say, or some shit. This would do good for you just because you get a lot of value from the shield that kind of refreshes every time you're not in combat for a while. Besides that, I just don't see why you'd want to build this over these two items in any other game. I feel like this is generally going to be like a pretty popular one, but like I said, it can get countered pretty easily. And I just think the build path for this one is a little bit better overall early game. So that's why I think this item is going to be in the B tier. It's not because it sucks. I just think these two are just better. And in terms of magic resist items across the board, it's ahead just because in terms of like armor items, right? These are just better armor items versus these ones, which are just kind of more niche, right? So like this one, I think you're going to be building more. This one, you'll be building more. This one, like these ones, you'll be building more than these two, but there's not that many more magic resist items. So like I just kind of nudge it to the top. If you want it, you could put it here. I don't think it changes that much in the long run, but I'm putting it in a second in the B tier. Let me know what you guys think. Going on to the third item into the B tier, Sunfire Cape. Now, Sunfire Cape, in my opinion, just kind of fell off a little bit just because I find like the immolate damage got nerfed overall. I don't think it ramps. I think it's just like a flat damage that's a little higher than it was before, but there is no ramping on it. So overall, in like a long fight, I don't think you're going to be actually getting as much value from this item as you used to before. I still think it's a strong item. I don't think it's a bad item. I think it's still pretty decent against champions that are going to sit on you a little longer. Like maybe like the Garens, the Dariuses, potentially the Urgots. Champions where at least Thornmail, you find like it's not as useful. Garen's gonna be spinning on you, so Thornmail, you don't gain that much value from it. Darius, you do get the value because he is gonna potentially heal with his Q, but there is like the outplay potential with your dashes to kind of counteract that too. So Sunfire Cape, you might get more value from it, but I still think if that's not what's gonna be like the changer for you, I would still go Unending Despair. But like, let's say Unending Despair, but there's only ranged champions, only for Darius, kind of shit. So like Sunfire Cape might be the move. You get what I'm saying? But overall, I just don't think, like, even for wave clear, Thornmail actually is pretty good at wave clearing, by the way. Like, if you actually start getting hit by a bunch of champions, you're going to actually get a lot of value from this. From like the creep waves, you can kill creep waves pretty well with Thornmail, funny enough. Like, oh, well, they'll kill themselves. But you guys get what I'm saying. So I put it at the third just because I think it's not as niche as like the Randuins, which is only going to be good against like a bunch of crit champions. Because like, let's be real, unless Darius is building a Sundered Sky, this is shit against him. Not bad versus Garen, but still kind of shit versus Garen. And you could keep going down the list of all the other top laners, but this just doesn't really benefit you from. And to build it just against a Fed 80 carry, unless you're that far ahead and you have that much gold to allocate, I just don't see it being that worth it. I can see it being pretty decent against like Fioras, Trindamirs, and like another 80 carry who has a bunch of crit. But overall, I put it at the end of B tier because I still think it's better than all these other items, but it's just so niche to the point where I just don't build it every other game. All right, going down into the C tier, we're going to go over these 3 items. Now, the reason for why this is like this is mainly just because I think when I'm looking at an item, I'm looking at how often I'm going to build it. And I mean, none of these items I'm going to be building often. These are like even more niche than these ones, but this one at least has some resists in it compared to this one. And this one is just kind of so niche that I'd probably never build it almost ever. Break it down simply, Abyssal Mask is only going to be really good if you have strong AP carries on your team that you want to enable, and then you find it's worth investing in, and they have an AP champion that you want to build some resist on that isn't really a threat. So essentially, let's say you're playing against like an Annie who isn't really that fed, but she has enough damage that warrants you to want to build some MR. This could be like a good 4th, 5th item to build just so you have enough MR so she can't really burst you. That on top of your Jak'Sho potentially being your 3rd item, this being maybe your 4th item, and you're kind of stable with like these 2 items or something of like that combination against whichever champion you're up against. Or, you know, this could be like your potential, yeah, I don't see why I'd ever build this as like an earlier item. I just think these items are just always going to be better. These 3 magic resist items are just always going to be more better, like just going to be better than this one. But this is just really if like, okay, you have 2 magic damage champions on your team that you want to enable. You want to apply the unmake passive that's on it so you can reduce the magic resist from the enemy team. And yeah, that's the only reason why I would ever really buy it as like a really like 4th, 5th item, really to like kind of enable my team. But besides that, I just wouldn't really build it that often. So I would just put it into C tier because it's definitely not as shit as these items. There are resists in it, and that's why it's higher than this one. But it's just so niche that like I just can't put it in like a higher tier. Going on to what is it? Protector's Vow? What's it called? That's what it's called? I think it's called Protector's Vow. No, I might be trolling. But anywho, this item isn't a bad item. I just think since there's no resist in it at all, it's kind of a hard to justify to build item. Now, most tier items overall, you're building it because you want that value later in the game, right? If it's going to be Manamoon or this one or Seraphs, the item itself isn't that great until it gets upgraded, in which it becomes a little bit broken. And that does apply to Fimbulwinter. Now, there is still like the issue of Fimbulwinter not having any resists, but if Fimbulwinter did have resists, it would be kind of broken. But this in conjunction with like the Spirit Visage, Unending Despair, Revitalize build is really strong. And I would actually put this kind of like in a B tier, potentially low A tier, if that is going to be the build you're going to be going for. If anything, maybe even S tier, if you can get a lot of value out of it. But overall, if you're just looking at it as an item overall on this list, I'd say it's a C tier item just because you're actually, K'Sante's early game is so strong now that building this item early is kind of greed unless you're in a matchup in which you think it's worth it. Right? Like, let's say you're playing against like a champion who you're like, okay, just no, I might as well just get it. Let's say you're playing against a Mundo and you're like, okay, well, Mundo is just cringe. I'm never going to really be able to bully him as hard as I might want to. I'm just going to build this item and scale. Then I can see that being pretty decent. If you play against some champions, like, you know, you really truthfully believe that's like, okay, at a certain point, they're going to outscale me. There's nothing I can really do about it. But you don't, like, they won't necessarily kill you either. This could be a decent item because, like, when it comes to like having like your 4th, 5th item, this could be a pretty decent 4th, 5th item if you have like a build that's pretty good with it. But like I said, 9 times out of 10, if you're ever building this item, it's only because you're going to be doing like the healing build with like Spirit Visage and with Spirit Visage, Revitalize in your runes, and Unending Despair. If you can get that combo, I think this item is really strong. If not, I don't think it's that good. And then going on to the last item here, we're going to go to Dead Man's Plate. I just think this item just isn't that good. In terms of like fighting stats, this is like a utility item. It's really good if you need to chase people down, which yes, you kind of do, but you also don't really need to as K'Sante. Like, you kind of have a decent amount of mobility in your kit, not as much as before, but you don't need to like, you don't really need this item in comparison to some other champions like Darius maybe, or like the Garens, you know? Like some of these champions who really have trouble getting to their targets. K'Sante is a lot better than a lot of these other champions, even though they are bruisers. I don't feel like you need this as much as some other champions specifically. The only thing I could see this item being good at is like in conjunction with this. If you're really getting super kited, like you're playing against an Ashe and shit, this gives you slow resist. I think that could be pretty decent. You know, if you're playing against an Ashe, super late game, you can't hit her. You get this as like your 5th, 6th item just so that you can actually like play the game. I think it's pretty decent. But if not, I just don't see why you ever build this item versus any other armor item in the game. Like even just like these two would probably be better than this item in general. Like, you probably just get more value from them, unless it's like that, like unless you're playing against like Ashe and shit. You get what I'm saying? Okay, going down to the D list, the D tier. It's becoming a little bit more clear with the pattern of what's going on now. Obviously, these two are support items. So like overall for like gold efficiency, like you get more gold on K'Sante playing at the top lane or the mid lane, and probably even in the jungle than you would as a support. So building these items just don't make that much sense. That's why they're in the D tier. Hollowed Radiance, I don't like this item as a whole because your wave clear is already super good on the champion. I think the build path is kind of shit. You have to go for a Spectre's Cowl. It just feels really, really, really bad having to actually build this item. I think this item is like super niche. It could be pretty decent maybe if you're up against like an AP champion who kind of can bully you, but I feel like you might as well just go for like a Kinnick Rooker instead. Let's say you're playing against Vladimir. I feel like Kinnick Rooker would be better. I think Spirit Visage versus Vladimir is just better too, not in the sense of like the counter, but like if he's gonna fight you in heal, you might as well fight him back in heal type shit. And you get what I'm saying? So like I just think this item just isn't that good currently right now, and I'm putting it in the D tier. But I think overall as a completed item, you would probably get more value from it than these two items. And also like the AoE damage you get is just so like niche. You don't need it. Like you're better off just getting like either a Sunfire Cape or a Thornmail for like wave clear, and your wave clear is already good. So I just think this item doesn't really have that much of a use case in your kit. Like I said, you could build it if you really want to cheese people, and like if you know just champions who struggle with wave clear early game and you really just want to kind of beat the shit out of them and like force them to try to farm on a turret and stuff. This item could be that item for like really shoving really quickly and like rotating. I think for mid lane, this could have a spot in some tech early game against some champions who struggle with wave clear. And you could probably like kind of like mana lock people where it's like, okay, you're running out of mana, just keep shoving them type shit. But overall, I don't think it's that good as an item. And then these two items, I just think Zeke's, the active, is just kind of a little bit better in terms of 1v1s and fighting and maybe peeling. They're not going to lock it. But honestly, it's like composition. If you need the shield, this one would be better. If not, like I think K'Sante jungle, first item, you get like an early locket. I mean, like an early Zeke's. That could be pretty cheese with like the Flame Horizon, I think it's called. Whatever it's called, like the little circle of fire when you ultimate. That could be pretty decent. But overall, I just don't think is that good of an item. Okay, going on to F, guys, I don't think I need to go that deep into it. The video is going to be done soon. We're already at 40 minutes. We're going to go quickly into these items, but I think you guys can kind of get the idea of what's going on. Warmogs, well, let's just go over and see this right away. I think Trailblazer might actually have some armor in it, so we could actually put this probably at like the top of the list. Maybe, actually, but not really. I think Warmog still would probably be the better one, and then I think Trailblazer, and then these two would come after. Now, maybe it's debatable because this one's actually not as bad. Like this one, the only reason why it's an F tier is because I don't think there's any resist. I think it's just straight HP. And I think Heartsteel is just a trash item as well because it's just HP and you don't really need it, and it doesn't really benefit you that much to have it as an item. You don't scale off of HP anymore, and you never really scaled that well with HP in the first place. Even in the old one, it was never that great of HP scalings. You could have went for it, but now just like almost no reason to get it. It's literally a purely HP scaling item, and you don't scale with HP. So like this item is just probably the worst item you could build on K'Sante now. Knight's Vow, I can see this being a decent 4th, 5th item. I'd say 4th item if you're ahead. So like not if you're behind, not if you're even. If you're really ahead, you're really snowballing a game, and there's a champion on your team that you want to protect. If it's your jungler who's fed, a Master Yi, whatever it is, I can see this item just being good. If you guys watch a lot of pro play, you'll see a lot of people build some of these items just because they're very cheap items that you can kind of squeeze in and get like a little bit of value if you are super ahead and you're trying to close out a game. Knight's Vow is like a 4th item, could be pretty decent if you have like a really fed champion on your team and you really just want to kind of, you know, give them that extra bit of like protection, take some damage off of them, bring it to yourself. It could be a pretty decent item actually. But besides that, like unless you're like super far ahead, just don't build it. It's not worth it. Trailblazer, I'm only putting it at the top of here. I'd still think it's like this. I would still put it like this because this item just kind of, it's actually not that bad. Like it's kind of the same logic between this one. It all depends on how you want to look at it. If you wanted like for rotations, quick rotations on your team, if you're really that far ahead, it can be pretty decent. I think it has a chain vest in it. If I'm not wrong, I could be wrong. They probably changed it. But if there is a chain vest, it could be here. If there's no chain vest, it's definitely here. I still just, heck, if there's no chain vest, it's probably here. But if there is a chain vest, it's like here or here, depending on how you want to look at it. I still think this one is probably better overall. And I think this one could probably be decent in some games if you want like quicker rotations. If it's like a cloud map, I don't know. You're like, it's really super niche. It's up to you to figure that out. But I put Warmogs at the top just because if you have enough HP, Warmogs actually has a lot of value in terms of the regen that you get from it. So if you guys ever play against Dr. Mundos in lane, they're going to rush Warmogs. They're going to trade with you until you basically can't keep trading with them. That's going to be their goal. So it's either you have to kill the Mundo or he's just going to keep out sustaining you because he has no mana and he's just going to sit in the bush with Warmogs and full heal, right? That's kind of like the Mundo meta right now, currently. Same thing could be done with any other champion really who builds this. Sejuani's do this because it's pretty good. You kind of take some fights, you trade, and then you kind of pull off from a fight, off an objective, heal with your Warmogs, and you keep just going back and forth. You just keep dancing around with the Warmogs regen. Now, obviously, K'Sante doesn't scale with HP anymore, but as like a 4th, 5th item, if you're playing against a very heavy poke composition and you need to be the guy to soak damage, this could still be the item for you. And that's why I'm putting it at the top of the F tier, just because I think Warmogs as a whole, with the way the passive works, it just gives you like a lot of utility in those specific cases. But just because there's no resist, I can't put it any higher than F tier. And that's it, guys. That's going to be my K'Sante patch 14.21 tier list. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Some of these are like debatable. I think for the most part, I have most of it on like to a T. Some of these things can be kind of swapped around, but I think overall as a whole, I got most of them pretty well. But like I said, let me know what you guys think. Leave a comment down below. Leave a like if you actually enjoy this type of video. I can make some for some other champions in the future as well. I know most of you guys are here for K'Sante, but I do plan on still making some content for other champions in the future, but I will still be putting this champion kind of at the forefront of my channel for the most part. But if you're also new to the channel, subscribe because I'm going to be making a lot of more videos in the future. I try to post a couple times per week. My goal is potentially to do this full time in the future. That's going to take some time, but obviously, you know, the more people who like the videos, who subscribe to the channel, just help me get to that point where I can get monetized and actually potentially turn this into a job. But yeah, that's going to be it for me, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed the video as always, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.